Hello and welcome to another episode of DCU Daily. And today we are talking about the Batman and the Penguin. Recently there was a story out. Jeffrey Wright was being interviewed, and one of the questions he was asked was, "Hey, well, what's going on with the Batman Part 2?" And what he had to say was, "I haven't seen the script for it, so I don't know." But he did say, "Let's be patient about it." Matt Reeves is obviously hard at work on the script, but we do still have some questions because, of course, it's been almost 2 years now since the Batman came out. Of course, we've had, strike-related delays and all that's gonna, cause all kinds of issues with, shows and movies getting pushed back, including The Penguin. But we also have heard news that, Matt Reeves is developing an Arkham show for the DCU, which is like, of course, separate from his Batman universe. So he seems to be busy and has his, hands in a lot of different pots. He's of course working on that Batman animated series with Bruce Timm and J.J. Abrams. So he's involved in a lot of different things that are all Batman related across multiple different universes. Now, the question becomes, are those various projects sort of distracting him or taking his time away from working on the Batman too, right? So we will talk about that today. But the bigger, neat piece of news that's basically as fresh, off the press as it can be is that the Penguin is well on its way back into production, and Colin Farrell was seen on set today. And we'll show you a few pictures that we found online, and I think it goes to show you that hey, they're truly back and working on this show. He's in the thick of it. You will see, he's got a number of actors around him. They've got this. I don't know. It looks like they're standing in a pile of rubble. Maybe a building came down, something blew up, or whatever. They've got some green screens around it, so maybe there's some set extensions that will be added in post production, I'm sure. So we'll dig into that. We'll talk about what that means. We'll also talk about, what the timeline for the Penguin is in terms of when it's going to come out. But to do all of that and so much more, as always, I have with me today John. How are you doing today?
Great. Now that we are talking about Batman, because who doesn't love Batman and, all this news and everything is very exciting. But yeah, the Penguin and the Batman, not a ton of news has been going on with the latter. The most we've gotten is that Jeffrey Wright interview, which is a little concerning, obviously. Like I know we as fans want like all the news, every little facet of production. We want everything. We want, the obsessed fans that go to the sets and, take pictures with their cell phones, have like really grainy ass video and, just look at every facet of production. But sometimes, as Bright said, just got to be patient. And yeah, I think it's trusting with Matt Reeves. I mean, it had been so long since an update that someone asked James Gunn on Threads, like, "Hey, is this
Still
still
happening?
happening?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's still happening. It's not canceled. Calm down.
Yeah.
Just obviously be patient." And clearly this is like a guy with his own vision, with a lot of, creative freedoms. And as one would say, we are our own worst critic. And I bet he, submits a script. He's like, "No, I could do it better." He's like, "No, no, no, I could do it better." And then I know like the whole point of script writing is to writing like multiple drafts, but like maybe sometimes like, there's one way he wants to go with the character, but then he just gets an idea and wants to go completely different. And maybe he's just really just trying to create the perfect sequel. And, I commend him for that. But I will say, seeing the Penguin in action on set with Colin Farrell, it's definitely, bringing sort of that a little bit into that universe again, into the Reeves verse, I guess, to really um let us know that this universe is thriving, it's alive and well. The set photos look really exciting. We have Colin Farrell in his famous makeup. You have that big famous coat, that he's usually in, the big fur coat. And yeah, it's just like it looks like something like just really exciting is going on. and I just can't wait for it. Like, whether, it really it does take place 1 week after the Batman, and if it even if it does do its own thing, obviously staying in that world, but really doing its own thing, I'm excited for whatever they have in store because it looks really, really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think puts a lot of things in context when you think about the fact that it's taking place a week after the events of that movie. And if you remember the movie, that ends with basically Gotham being flooded because of the Riddler blowing out the mains across the city. So it ends up being a situation where I'm sure Gotham's not recovering from it overnight. And that
Right.
probably explains the rubble and all of that mess that Penguin is standing around in, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, we're probably going to get a show that is dealing as much with the aftermath of the Batman as it is dealing with the rise of the Penguin
Right.
within that aftermath. So it sounds like Matt Reeves is using this show as a pretty neat bridge to whatever comes next in the Batman Part 2. What I am wondering though is, I know we have discussed this recently, but I'm curious. Do you think that this show is meant to set up the Penguin to basically be the lead antagonist in the next movie? Like, have we been overthinking it this whole time? And we think about like, okay, so maybe they're gonna go with Mr. Freeze, or maybe they're gonna go with some other crazy, like maybe we're gonna get the Joker, another version of the Joker. Maybe we'll get something completely like out of left field. But is the villain of the Batman Part 2 in front of our eyes? Is it the Penguin? What do you think?
Well, I think that could be uh, you know, I think that could be a good decision because I mean, Colin Farrell is a tremendous actor. He did a great job. He was one of the best parts of the original film, and they did say, believe it was something along the lines of like, "Oh, um, this is going to this the series occurs shortly before the events of Batman Part 2, and it would be establishing some plans that would lead into the sequel." Now, whether that is the Penguin as the main villain, whether maybe it's the Maroni crime family, maybe it's Sophia Falcone. It could be, anything in regards to that more grounded feel. The Penguin would be obviously a great villain. I just think it would be a little weird that this would be the second time that a direct sequel to a Batman movie would have the Penguin as a villain. And not like saying that's a bad thing. However, I think Matt Reeves would want to try to really do his own thing. And I think the Penguin would, well, I feel like the Penguin series would really build that world surrounding this character, this side, the underworld. I think that could be really great. I just think that like Reeves would want to really like build the world properly and not just using the same villains over and over again. So like he would have the show, whether it's just a mini series or it's an actual TV series. I don't believe it's been um, greenlit for a second season just yet. So there is that as well. I think he would want to, I believe that something that happens here in the Penguin would lead to the villain of the Batman Part 2 happening. I think the villain would appear here in maybe a small role, and that would lead into the events of the Batman Part 2. So I think the Penguin definitely does have like a mark to make in terms of what we'll see in the sequel, but I don't think it's going to be Colin Farrell as the Penguin himself. I just feel like he's getting um he's getting a little bit too much to shine, I guess, because he had a small role in the original film. He's
I
literally
mean, it's
having his own show, and then he's
yeah,
being the main villain. I think that's a little bit too much Penguin.
right.
So, as again, it would be great, but I feel like Matt Reeves would definitely want to go his own way for the sequel and really you know, build all these villains,
Yeah,
maybe ones we
yeah,
definitely haven't seen yet because we've gotten Riddler, Catwoman, Penguin before. So maybe like go weird with the villain and all that. I think that
yeah.
could be a little bit more interesting.
Like, although I will say there's a bit of a pattern emerging. If you, I mean, again, it's been only one movie, but it seems like Matt Reeves has so far gone after some of those classic characters that the 80s and 90s cinematic iterations of Batman movies, featured. You have Catwoman, you've got Riddler, you've got Penguin, you've even got Joker for, however long we did get him. And they're all incredibly reimagined into these completely, like, different kinds of characters. They're nothing like, by today's standards, goofier, but very Tim Burton-esque, because of course Tim Burton was like the whole architect of that universe back in the day. But like the Matt Reeves iterations seem to be more grounded, much darker, much more realistic. But certainly they feel more dangerous. And if you were to continue in that vein, you could, of course, continue, and along with the Penguin, you can introduce Two Face again. Although at this point,
Yeah,
I think Two Face has been in like every live action iteration of the Batman. So
almost everyone, but
like
to be
it's
fair, it would make sense since The Long Halloween, which was a huge, huge inspiration for the Batman. I think it would kind of weirdly make sense to introduce maybe not Two-Face, but introduce Harvey Dent and then like
I
kind
was
of build that
surprised we
relation.
didn't actually see him in that movie, right?
I was surprised too, but
A
like
lot of people were expecting that they were
yeah,
like, there's gonna
but
he's
to be
gonna be
fair,
in
I feel
there.
like that Matt Reeves really wanted to make a movie about Batman as much as Bruce Wayne. It was definitely about Bruce Wayne, like dealing with being Batman for a little while, obviously not being an origin film, but not being a veteran. So we kind of got that weird in between of like him being um a threat at us at this point and just really focusing on Bruce Wayne. I feel like if you introduced, Harvey Dent, I feel like that would have been a little bit too much, especially getting two other characters that are villains like Penguin and Catwoman, and even add Carmine Falcone. That would technically make four villains in one film. And I think that would have been a little bit too much. So I would love to see more Long Halloween influence in the sequels. Like maybe not introducing like not obviously not just doing an adaptation. That's kind of boring, you know. We already got a great adaptation in animated form. We don't need it in live action. So like I would love to see it would be really great to see, like, maybe even, like, a small cameo from, like, introducing, like, a Calendar Man or introducing many themes that were present not only in Long Halloween, but in Dark Victory as well. Kind of I know, Robert Pattinson did say that he wanted to have a Robin, and I think, like, borrowing a lot of Dark Victory and Robin Year One could definitely be really interesting, just like adding in a lot of those elements and like in a lot of those characters. And I just think that would be just really honing in on the, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, may he rest in peace, influence there. And whoever, you know, whatever characters you need, whatever tones you need to do, I would say go for it. That would be the main thing from like not just with the Batman Part 2, but with the Penguin as well. I would love to see not just see like the Falcones and the Maronis duking it out with Oswald Cobblepot stuck in the middle and like kind of doing like a Scarface thing because they did say Scarface was a big influence on the series how with his rise to power. Um, but I would love to see like those smaller characters that we don't see a lot of in live action make their debut or just kind of have like a little reference here there like like throwing in like Renee Montoya or something like that. I think that could be really good or like the Question could be like a really cool thing where it's like build the universe a little bit. I think Matt Reeves wants to solely focus on one hero. I don't think he wants to introduce other heroes, which is fine, but I would say like I wouldn't mind seeing like purely a ground level street level hero universe where it's just people with no powers, just kind of like vigilantes fighting crime. I think that could be a really cool aspect as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that that gives you a really cool way to expand the universe without necessarily including Batman in every episode, right? Because that's the other big elephant in the room is this is a show that takes place in a world where there is a Batman, and yet you wonder if we're ever gonna see Robert Pattinson or his Batman in this show. Now, I wanted to ask you a little more about like the genre of the show. You mentioned Scarface, so it kind of gives me some sense as to where this might be going. But
Yeah.
like if it were up to you, what kind of genre would you be modeling this show after? And of course, a lot of shows and movies nowadays, they straddle multiple genres. You don't have to live in one specific one, but
Right.
like, what would your vision look like? And then also based on what you've seen so far, both from the set photos, from all the marketing materials, that like, little featurette reel that they put out a year ago, where do you think they're actually going? So I want to know both, like what your thoughts are, what you would do, and then what they are doing in the show.
I feel like the genres and tones they're gonna go for are definitely like visceral, like crime drama sort of vibes. Um like they did mention Scarface and The Long Good Friday were main influences, and how it's sort of like the American dream, that kind of thing. Being the horror guy, as you can clearly tell from my poster in the background, that I would love to see, like, kind of like bring in the really horrific aspects of like a poverty stricken Gotham, especially one that just got like flooded, and like really like showing like the horrors of like what people would do to survive. So you could have like sort of like the parallels between like Oz climbing to power after the death of Carmine Falcone, but also dealing with like a lot of these smaller characters just like trying to survive, trying not to just die. I think like bringing like those little tiny aspects. I don't think they'll do a lot of that. I think they'll focus mainly on Oz, the Maronis, and the Falcones. I think that's going to be like the main thing. However, I think it would just be really cool to bring in those aspects. And, I just like having like this really long, like sort of like Godfather-esque, Goodfellas-esque, like, story of like this character really like developing into this, you know, not saying he was like a pansy before, like but he was, just a guy, he was just a henchman, but now he's like gonna really, become something. He's gonna like, become like a Don, he's just
Yeah,
gonna
and
be like that brutal, visceral feel, and I really am excited to see that.
yeah, I mean, and to that
So,
end, I think like as you were just talking about the horrific, surreal aspects of a city that was already riddled with crime and poverty, but now has to somehow come out the other end of being flooded. Which look, there's that right there gave me. And I mean, if I was a writer, I'd be like putting these notes down, which I probably still should because it could work in a different story somewhere down the road that I work on. But like, can you imagine, like, okay, so this is the rise of like like a new dawn in Gotham City. He's gonna become like the new kingpin. Well, not the Marvel kingpin, but a kingpin, let's say, in Gotham. So um I'm thinking like I can easily imagine there being an episode like as part of his rise, he sort of develops an aura around him so that, because the thing is, when you in real life, as much as we have seen it in movies and TV shows because they're based on what happens in real and has happened in real life, people in these kinds of positions of power don't just rise to power purely out of a sense of fear, because then they could be strucken down at the moment's notice. Like as soon as somebody sees a weakness in them just enough, they'll strike him down. But these kind of people usually come to power and in the crime circle, and they stay there, and their lasting power, it has to do with the fact that they have not only got this cult of personality, but the way they build it is they have a certain sense of righteousness to them. where they will, for maybe like every 10 acts of horrific crime they will commit, they'll probably like do 2 or 3 things that you were like, "Oh my god, like that is the most amazing thing you could have done for that person." And that creates that sense of like, you know what? He may be, you may say that he's the biggest crime lord in all of Gotham City, but like that guy saved my kid's life, and so like I'll forever be in his debt. And so it's sort of like you
Yeah.
kind of develop this sense of following. So I can easily imagine like in have if this has happened in the real world. Like I'm not saying in the sense of like, you know, that somebody like the Penguin is, maybe there is, but like we've had all kinds of like increasingly bad and severe tropical storms that have hit like the coastal areas all across the eastern seaboard, right? And then property values get diminished, houses get washed away, and people then have to like fight their way through insurance and you know like try to find like a way to get their money back and try to rebuild their houses. The Penguin could be in a position of, you know, this Collapod could be in a position where he can like help out a few people with situations like that, where they are literally just in his debt for the rest of their life. Like, you know, and as part of that, he then buys favor, you know, he then uses that relationship and buys favors off them, uses that to like, you know, gain more power by gaining connections into different parts of the cities, you know, not only just political authorities, but also just the civilian, you know, infrastructure and all those kinds of things. And you can kind of get to see that, and you see, so because ultimately you can't carry a show with a cobblepot character that's simply a villain. You have to kind of round him out a bit more. And I think those kinds of moments can really help give you, like, I can just imagine in my head, I'm like, oh my god, like I'll be watching this and I'm like, holy crap, this is that kind of a show. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
damn, like, you know, even I want to hug this guy in this moment, but then a minute later he's beating up like probably some guy in an alley. Like, you know, it's like they've done a little bit of that in Daredevil with Kingpin, where you can kind of be like,
Yeah,
oh,
exactly what I was thinking
but
of.
right, like, and then and of course for every Martin Scorsese a gangster movie, there's like many instances of that where you see them and like they look like the probably the most generous normal, somebody who's a normal person who's very generous, and in the next scene they're doing something horrific, like, you know, blowing somebody's brains out with a baseball bat or whatever. But like it's, we could get to see that here. Even that, what's that show that Sylvester Stallone's been doing on Paramount Plus? Is it
Tulsa King.
Tulsa King? They have a lot of scenes in that show that are exactly like that, where he would just go in randomly and stand up for somebody, and he's like, you know, there's a certain sense of like, you know, honor and pride that he takes, and a moral code that he follows, however twisted it might be. But you know, when it comes down to doing the business that he is into, that all the running his crime empire, he's still doing that. But then there's these other instances where like, you know, like he's helping somebody out in a bind, like who otherwise would have probably gotten crushed by some, you know, some other powerful force of crime or whatever. So yeah, that's the part of the show that I'm really excited about. Like, you know, I would love to see them build the world more, introduce all those characters, but I really want to see how we can kind of like get this Godfather-esque mythology built up behind that Penguin. Because if they are going to do this, like earlier I was thinking like, they're building him up to use him as the villain and use him up in the next movie and then push him off to the side. But now have, you know, with what you described, now in my mind I'm imagining, oh, they can take this a step further. Like this could be like, you know, the rise of the, you know, a new Godfather in the city of Gotham that's gonna like be around for a while. And Batman, for the better or for worse, may have to like interact with him, make deals with him, and like work through him and around him, and so that, you know, he's gonna continue to persist as a villain maybe until the third or fourth film, and then maybe then we have a confrontation. Because otherwise it would just feel like, you know, it's very linear, like, all right, so we built him up to then put him down, now we're moving on. And I think Matt Reeves so far, with all of his other, you know, ventures surrounding, you know, the Batman, whether it's other spin-off TV shows and everything else that he's working on, the number of sequels he's talked about, it looks like he's wanting to develop something much larger scale than what we have ever seen before. Like, you know, we're not just simply aiming for a trilogy of movies like what Christopher Nolan did. And you know, on one end, Christopher Nolan was yet to be convinced to come back to do a third movie, whereas here Matt Reeves is like, I may be around here for a long time, and Robert Pattinson's like, sure thing, I love Batman. I'm gonna be playing this guy for 20 years if you want me to. So
Yeah.
I don't think he said that exactly, but like he's not in any rush to leave the character. So now the Jeffrey Wright story, we sort of mentioned it earlier, but I did want to ask you
Yes.
what specifically did he say, and then also what kind of insight we can glean from that in terms of the timeline for this movie, because that is the big concern. Like I think they have it tentatively scheduled for October 2025,
Yeah.
but given that we really haven't heard much about it and we're in 2024 now, Superman Legacy is coming out in summer 2025 and it's going into production this March. Admittedly, the Batman might have fewer visual effects, although probably not by much. But we really have, I mean, on one hand, James Gunn posts about Superman Legacy every day. Oh, look at the pile of storyboards that I've been working on, or some like, here's some artwork, or like, here's some more inspiration and maybe some costume tests. Here's a new casting. And then on the other hand, like Matt Reeves is nothing. Like we're not hearing anything. Like we're hearing everything
Yeah.
but, the Batman Part 2. So like, what did Jeffrey Wright have to say about that?
He was saying, because he was doing an interview for his newest film, American Fiction, just got nominated for a bunch of Oscars. So of course they had to eventually ask him about, instead of focusing on this award-winning movie that
Yeah.
has
You
gotten
usually at the end of the
unanimously
interview,
great.
yeah. Yeah.
I think it did. I think it won a few Golden Globes if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. But they're like, oh, we got to ask you about the superhero thing you're a part of because superheroes that gets clicks. So we were like, okay, Jeffrey Wright, what's going on? We haven't heard anything with the Batman. What's going on? He's like, well, the thing is, I haven't gotten a script. However, I have a lot of trust in Matt Reeves, and I would say tell the fans to be patient because um it it a lot of this stuff takes time, and I mean, to be fair, that's the same excuse Ben Affleck did when he was still, directing the Batman, and look how that turned out. But I still feel that there is a bit of trust there. Like this is a heavy universe. It made, Warner Brothers almost $800 million on a $150 million budget, I believe.
Yeah.
So he's like, you know what, we're working. I bet Matt Reeves is working hard on it, so I would say just be patient. And I would say, yeah, that I feel like that's the best anybody could say, because I feel like Matt Reeves has probably closed himself off in his house for the last like year just writing the script probably, and so he just wants to make it perfect. He just wants to make it the best possible sequel for us. So I think Jeffrey Wright is just, giving people a good sort of vibe on what to expect. And I feel like they could still make that October 2025, October 3rd specifically, 2025 release date, because it is, even though there still is a lot of VFX shots, I think, it's more like it's so like grounded and to the ground that it's not, Superman flying around, him like fighting big monsters or anything like that. Um, it's slower. It's like a lot of this stuff, but I think it just comes down to Matt Reeves. He's not rushing this. He wants to make a great film, like he did with the first one, and um, I trust him in that. I think a lot of people should trust him in that. Um, and with all of that, I just think it would also help that, as you mentioned, Superman Legacy is coming out in 2025 as well. Might as well, market the fact that you have a Superman film and a Batman film coming out the same year for the first time in history, pretty much. We haven't, if you look at the timeline of all the Superman films and all the Batman films, that you like, that you had like the Reeves and Christopher Reeve specifically, and the Michael Keaton, initially Michael Keaton films were like a decade apart, and then on top of that you had, they were just missing each other by like a little bit. You had Batman Begins and Superman Returns a year apart, and then you had Dark Knight Rises and Man of Steel a year apart, so they got close a couple times, but I feel like that would be like a really good marketing strategy for Warner Bros. It's like, hey, you're getting the two biggest superheroes outside of Spider-Man coming out the same year. Get pumped. It's two different universes, sure, but you're getting sort of like the epitome of both heroes. You're getting the guy, ironically, that can fly, but is the most like down to earth hero you could possibly get. And then you have the Batman, who is technically, well, literally down to earth, but yet he like drives himself to be like peak human condition and drives to be further than human, like creature of the night type of thing. So you have like these two like heroes that everybody loves, everybody wants to see, and you're getting two very different interpretations of, like, not interpretations, but two different like tones and genres of both, and you're getting kind of something for everybody, again adding into that variety thing that like a lot of people are craving with superhero fatigue. So I feel like they would really want to really sell that. At the very most it might be delayed until like December, like getting like a Christmas season sort of thing. um so use that. But I think they'll stick with that. I think they'll stick with that release date and just have like spend a lot of time on pre-production, and but then just maybe a little bit smaller production, post-production. But I just feel like that is like too good, and they gotta stick with that. And I think it would be really fun. And getting these two heroes on the big screen in the same year would just be way too cool. And I feel like
Yeah,
they can't let that slip through their fingers so easily.
yeah. No, I mean that's a great point. It is, and honestly, there would be enough of a space, a gap between the two movies that you can easily let them both make as much money as they can possibly want to make. So all in all, I think it would be a great year for anybody who's a fan of superheroes and especially of DC's superheroes, because you'll be getting possibly two definitive iterations. Like it's of course right now I personally think the Dark Knight is still probably the most definitive one, but who knows? I mean, the Batman seemed like as Batman has been in quite some time. So, and it seems like James Gunn is aiming to make Superman Legacy very much reminiscent of that classic vintage Superman, that all star Superman, and leaning a little more, harkening back to the Christopher Reeve era rather than going with more of what we got with the Zack Snyder era of Superman. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Certainly, the last time we had Superman and Batman on screen in the same year, it was Batman v Superman, and then of course we had Justice League, and to mix results across the board. But this time around, if they'll be on their own adventures, which is something we never got in the DCEU. We never had a solo outing for the Batman, and we never had a solo outing for Superman after he met Batman. So, although in this case, the two characters exist in their own continuities, I
Right.
would be looking forward to seeing, what other characters they bring into, like you said earlier, the Robin idea that, Robert Pattinson is into that and would like to see a Robin. We are actually working on a video where we'll kind of break down, what direction they can go in and maybe what options they might have available to them and what Matt Reeves might want to do if they do intend to bring a Robin into the world of the Batman. So be on the lookout. We'll probably put that DCU Daily Special out sometime soon. But in the meantime, guys, it's been fun talking to you as always. John, it's been fun talking to you, getting your
Course.
opinion on this. We saw some pictures of Colin Farrell. He's back on set. We're working on the Penguin. I'll put that up on screen briefly again. The show is set to come out later this year. Late 2024 is what we heard last. So it seems like we're getting closer. We're still a good ways off, but we're getting closer to it. It was delayed by the strikes last year in Hollywood, so they've got a lot of filming left to do. But then once they're done with it, we'll hopefully get another fantastic entry into that Matt Reeves verse, if you will call it that. And the Penguin, I hope that they are building him up to be a character that lasts for a long time in the world of the Batman, rather than getting used up and killed off in the next movie. So with that said, of course, the Batman Part 2 is still tentatively titled for October 2025. And John, as you said, they would be hard pressed to miss that opportunity. Let us know in the comments, guys, what you think. Are they going to make that date, or do they have plans in place? And are things rolling, and are machines turning in the background, and we just don't know anything about it? Maybe that's what's going on, and we'll just get some news like Matt Reeves will say out of nowhere, "We're going into production tomorrow," or like next week, or somehow, and then all of a sudden we're like, "Oh, great." Uh, but then again, usually that doesn't happen without people hearing about casting news or casting calls going out. Things get out.
Right.
So hopefully we'll get some of that news in the near future. And then whenever that does happen, we'll bring that to you. We'll talk about it. We'll break it down and analyze it. And then you can comment below in the video on YouTube. If you're on Twitch, if you're watching us on X, or if you're watching us on Facebook, leave a comment in the comment section there. If you're in the live chat, drop your comments there. We always keep an eye on there. We got some comments earlier in the stream. Are they really canceling the Batman 2? No, I'm pretty sure they're not canceling it. They'd be hard pressed to even try to cancel that movie. The first movie made so much money. There's no way they're canceling the Batman 2. The Batman 2 is full gear ahead, and I think James Gunn even confirmed that, right, John? So you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, he did confirm it
Um,
on his threads a while back,
yeah.
I think.
So they're not canceling it. So Bromhide, I'm gonna let you know with the simpler word no. That movie is happening, as you've been talking about it. And if you joined us late, then you can skip back earlier in the show, and we were discussing how there hasn't been much news, but and no script has been distributed to the actors. But it looks like Jeffrey Wright says that, hey, be patient. It's coming, and maybe sooner than we expect. Although for a lot of people, it's already way too late. So let us know in the comments what you think about all of that, about the Penguin, about the Batman Part 2, where you stand on both of those projects. What else would you like to see from the world of the Batman? And we'll be back here tomorrow. We'll be talking about more Matt Reeves related work. This time around, we'll be talking about his DCU show, the Arkham-based TV series that he's working on, which caught a lot of people by surprise. So we'll try to figure out what exactly that show could be about, because we don't even know who the Batman is going to be in the new DCU, and yet we've already got a TV show that's a spin-off of that main character, in the works. So we'll talk about that and so much more. If there's any breaking news that happens, we'll discuss that. But up until then, come back here each and every day. Check out DCU Daily. Check out Also Curious. Check out Rolling Underground. And if you want, you can always go back into our catalog. We've got a lot of episodes, and I think we did some fan theories, some fan castings recently. So even I think yesterday we talked about Wonder Woman. Not Wonder Woman. We talked about casting a director for Supergirl. I keep thinking Wonder Woman because I suggested Patty Jenkins, so that
Right.
got some comments. Anyway, I'll stop blabbering on here, guys. It's been nice talking to you, and we'll see you on the next episode of DC Daily.